All right, welcome to Bet the Edge. I'm Jay Croucher here with Drew Dinsick. Today we're going to talk a lot of baseball, talk a little Shohei. We'll talk NL Manager of the Year, AL Manager of the Year, a couple markets that I don't believe have been offered in the past, or if they have, the offering has been extremely limited. So we'll talk about that, and then we'll talk about the Wednesday NBA slate. But let's start, Drew, with the center of the baseball world, best player on the planet, most talented player in baseball history. Don't think that's really contested. Shouldn't be. Shohei Ohtani. Everyone knows what is happening there. What is your take on everything, and what do you expect? Any repercussions into the season, and how potentially we bet on markets? What do you think will be affected?
Yeah, I don't really understand what's going on here. And I don't have an intimate knowledge of the betting space to where I can completely wrap my head around how something like this might happen. But it seems impossible to me that this could be the facts that we've been given are the whole story. And just because of that, the chances that this just goes away seem low. So, and ultimately this may just be a footnote in the Ohtani story when it's all said and done, and nothing ever really does come of it more than this, because the interpreter might be, fall on the sword type of guy. But, yeah, I don't think we've gotten the whole story or even close to it. And I'm assuming there's going to be some investigation, and they better be able to prove a lot of what they said yesterday. And if they don't, then there's just going to be a lingering story that's swirling around the Dodgers all season long. And that can't necessarily be good. The Dodgers are an interesting team. The way that they've gone about team building has been very, very, chaotic in the last handful of years here. And, if Shohei shows up and is 90% of the player we saw in Anaheim for them, particularly behind, at the plate, then the Dodgers are going to win 110 games, and they're probably going to win the West, and they're probably going to get a 1 seed. And we know that doesn't mean much nowadays in the baseball playoffs, because of the just the chaotic nature of the way the series are set up. But Dodgers and Braves being your two teams that get buys in the NL are still very, very likely. And so, I think this could have definitely have ramifications across the National League if it turns into the type of distraction where Ohtani has to miss time. Certainly worth paying attention to. What was your read, I guess, on the factual part of the statement that was made yesterday?
Yeah, well, I think there's 4 things on this quickly in terms of all the stuff that is publicly out there, and everything that has become part of the narrative. Here are the things that I would take issue with, or at least would raise questions about. One, the fact that Ippei and Andrew Friedman addressed the entire Dodgers team in the clubhouse in Korea, and both said that Shohei paid off the debt. The idea that Shohei was just never going to find out about that and speaks no English whatsoever, when there are good reports from beat writers, from, I think Mike Trout has said this, like Shohei speaks like he understands English. He's been in the country for he's played here for 6 years or something. It's not like he doesn't know. It's not like me trying to understand, Danish or something. Like he's exposed to, I think he speaks some English whatsoever. That's at least on the record.
Sure.
That's completely ridiculous. 2, the fact that Shohei's people authorized Ippei to speak to ESPN, and presumably knowing what he was going to say. And then the fact that they did that seemingly before they spoke to their lawyers, I think shows that this isn't the most tightly run operation at the moment. And that I think there's a thought that, the Shohei he would never accuse someone of fraud unless it was absolutely true because of the repercussions.
Sure.
Every date has been so all over the place that I'm ready kind of for anything. And then 3, just always keep in mind that Shohei signed what is on face value the most ludicrous and disadvantageous contract structure that anyone has ever signed, seemingly. He's deferred $680 of his $700 million until 2033 and beyond. And that has never made any sense whatsoever. And then the last thing I would say is that, I don't know what is the true story. I don't think anyone really knows what is happening. But there is a chance that we'll just never find out because the incentive structure around this is that we're going to find out. And if, to your point, if Ipe is just willing to fall on the sword and confess to defrauding Shohei Ohtani of $4.5 million, and he's going to cop that, and maybe that's the truth, maybe it's not. But if he's going to go with it, then we may just never find out. But yeah, it's certainly a bizarre story. It doesn't really add up to me at all. And the fact that now it's like he's accused the guy of fraud. This is like a crime, and suddenly it's investigated. It doesn't get to go away. So I don't know what's going to happen, but I would think that it is. We're going to hear more about this as the season goes on.
Yeah. And I mean, again, all I can bring to this is my experiences in the space of the last 15 years, which have very, very little interaction with illegal bookmakers for lots of reasons. But I find it extremely implausible that someone is extending a line of credit to the tune of $5 million without knowing where that money's coming from, which means at some level, either Ipe was an extremely, careful, he was either very compelling in that his ability to come up with the money, or the bets were taken in a sense that it was coming out of that pot of money for whatever reason. And so it's nothing really checks out factually to where this is going to be a clean case, which makes me think that investigative reporters following this around all summer and coming up with funny, interesting angles and random reports. And certainly, if you're into one bookmaker for $5 million, there's probably other stories out there. So I think there's definitely more to be written, more to be talked about, and I think that's bad for the Dodgers. But your point about the contract is fascinating, and I still, like, when it happened at the time, it was like, huh, okay, what? All right, I guess so. And it's just that just went away. Like, that was a lot of deferred money for, and your agent talked you into it because you weren't going to get the same number if you took it all now. Okay, but that is a big chunk that is just sitting out there to be tapped into in 8 years. So, wild.
The point about Ipe and having the credit, I think that's kind of three-pronged, where it's one, how is a guy on an interpreter's salary? And I understand he's not your average interpreter. He's Shohei Ohtani's interpreter, but still, he's not making $1 million a year. How is he able to get $4.5 million on credit? Yeah. Two, how is he secondarily able to access Shohei Ohtani's bank accounts and make wire transfers? Yes. And then three, how is this not noticed? And it's like maybe one of the three could happen. Seems improbable. But all three, that parlay hitting seems extremely improbable. Sure. The other part to me that no one, I think, is focusing on enough is that the illegal bookie was bragging to his friends that Shohei Ohtani is betting with me. Yeah. And then seemingly when further pressed on it, was just like, no, I was just joking. Like, all right, well, this story doesn't really seem to add up. And again, not accusing Shohei of anything. Don't know. Maybe he's not. Maybe everything that he says is true. It just doesn't seem to make a great deal.
Here's the other thing. Like, they didn't need why with all the cloak and dagger stuff, right? Like, hey, Jay, is shocking news. A professional athlete with $100 million is lost $5 million betting. Like, that's happening. It is. It's happening. Sorry. Sorry, you didn't know that is happening out there a lot of places, and this just became news because of the weird shell game they're playing in terms of accountability, which I don't like.
Well, I think it's because I think it would have been fine. Everything would be fine if he was in the state of New Jersey or somewhere.
Yeah, sure.
It was. Sure. I think that my theory would be that they got really spooked once they realized that
who the counterparty was.
Yeah, and it's actually illegal to wire an illegal bookmaker $4.5 million in the state of California. And I don't know. The U.S. legal system, I don't have a great handle on how that would go state by state in terms of prosecution. But for the most part, the bettor doesn't usually get punished in that situation. It's more the incentive is to go after the bookmaker. And I don't know. It would have been a bit of a legal mess, but they're not going with that story anymore. So they're going with this new story of $4.5 million defrauded. And I don't know how it happened. So we will see how it unfolds in terms of ripple effects for the season, I mean, there's nothing good for the Dodgers. There's no upside. There's only some downside. Whether he would ever get suspended, I don't know. I would say it's probably a dog to happen at this point, just given everything that's happened and how long this would seemingly take to play out. So I think probably reasonably safe to go into the season with the expectation that Shohei Ohtani is going to be, playing DH for the Los Angeles Dodgers and hitting home runs. But there is certainly some downside risk that you have to bake in if you're going all in on the Dodgers to win the World Series. But anyway, let's talk about the Dodgers manager, Dave Roberts. I'm sure is having a great time at the moment. And the NL Manager of the Year market, Drew, where at the moment Craig Counsell, who departed the Brewers to go to their main rival, the Chicago Cubs, stay in the NL Central. He's your favorite at plus 600. David Bell, the Reds manager, is plus 800. Oli Marmol, the Cardinals manager, is plus 800. So your three favorites are all in the NL Central, which shows you where the NL Central is at the moment. Dave Roberts, 9-1. Rob Thompson, 9-1. Mike Shildt, 9-1. And Brian Snitker, 10-1 for a variety of reasons. I don't think any of those guys are going to win just because their teams are already very good outside of perhaps Shildt. But what do you make of this market?
Yeah, I like the idea of shopping in the NL Central generally, but you just got to find the right team. And the I guess if a team were to surprise the Braves in the East or the Dodgers in the West, would that manager be the de facto minus 500 favorite? Yes. But I don't think that either of those things are very likely. So this is going to come, most likely, I think, through whoever ultimately emerges as the surprise team in the Central, be it the outright winner of the Central or a team that makes the wild card from the Central. And I think, there's some compelling cases to be made for a lot of these teams. I don't think the NL Central is nearly as lopsidedly poor relative to the other divisions as the AL Central. There's some good teams in here. And, I think I almost hate to even say it out loud, but I think the Cardinals probably a little bit underrated in this division, even though, again, a lot of things not to necessarily like about the Cardinals. I think the fact that they're in the plus 200 range at the same price point as the Cubs with a more talented roster is tough. And right now, with the Reds being in sort of the third choice spot, would make them, kind of the team with the most leapability, where the manager might get the credit. So I guess if I had to just choose one shot in the NL, I'm taking the Reds to be the surprise upset. And I think that would, open the door for the manager to be manager of the year. What do you think?
Yep, Mr. Bell. Yeah, I think that all makes sense. And I think that when you're looking at storylines, a team rising up to win the NL Central makes a lot of sense as a candidate, given that, you're likely winners in the other divisions are the Braves and the Dodgers. And I think those managers, Roberts and Snitker, are going to be held to extremely high standards. So looking back at the history of this award, which I hadn't really done prior to this season because you couldn't really bet on this, it kind of, as you would expect, is in line somewhat with other Coach of the Year awards in the NBA, in the NHL, the Jack Adams, and in the NFL, where it goes to a coach who vastly exceeds expectations, who makes a significant wins improvement from year to year, and of late, who makes the playoffs naturally. And this wasn't actually the case like 15, 20 years ago, where guys actually won without making the playoffs. But now that you have an expanded playoff field, that is pretty much a bar to entry. The one difference I would say between MLB Manager of the Year and particularly NBA Coach of the Year is that teams that barely sneak into the playoffs and are like just above 500 but are really surprising, they seem to carry more weight than in the NBA, where remember a couple of years ago when like the Laurie Markkinen Cavs were set at 25.5 wins and then they won like mid 40s, but they were like the 8th seed or something and they tailed off. And JB Bickerstaff was just never going to factor in, even though they beat their win total by like 20. So he was just drawing dead in the NBA. Whereas in baseball, he may well have won the award, where that seems to get a bigger bump for whatever reason. Okay. And so that's why I look at someone like Derek Shelton, the manager of the Pirates, who is 12-1, like if he just sneaks into the playoffs at 83 and 79, then he may well win the award. And so the way I look at this market is, all right, particularly for someone like Shelton and the Pirates, who I don't think have made the playoffs in 9 years, like they're plus 400 to make the playoffs, and he's 12-1 to win Manager of the Year. Does that cohere? I don't think it necessarily does. And then you look at just the way that I kind of processed for this market was, look, first step, win total from last year, actual win total from last year, and then market win total over under from this year as the biggest projected increase, because that just gives you an initial step up. Yeah. And the guy in the NL who is the leader by far is the Cardinals manager, Ollie Marmol, they won 71 games last year somehow, and their over-under is 84 this year. So he's already expected just a 13-win improvement off the bat, and no one else is projected for more than a 5.5-win improvement, and that is Mr. Melvin in San Francisco. So what do you think of that as process?
I love that as process. And I love that it kind of because I think it's going to come down to who exceeds their expectations the most between these three teams that we just mentioned. Toss the Cubs, toss the Brewers. I think, again, very low likelihood that you got a real surprise coming out of the East or the West. So Pirates, Reds, Cardinals, choose your fighter is kind of the way I would look at this. And the with the highest with the co-favorites of the division for the Cardinals and the highest expected win probability, maybe there's a little bit less of a potential for an overachievement, whereas the most likely overachiever is surely Pittsburgh with their win total around 75.5 right now, although it's tough to really see how that's gonna happen. So yeah, I'm kind of dancing all around it, but I'm gonna end up back on David Bell here just because I think the Reds 80, we're 2 years away, 2 years removed from him managing this team to 62 wins. They made a 20-win leap last year. It largely went unnoticed because the Reds weren't ever really in contention to get the wild card. And so I think if they are really just like maybe another 10 wins, if you're talking about a 92 win team that is in control of an NL Central, I think the lag of the 20-win delta from last year might catch up and help push David Bell across the line this year.
Yep, I think that's reasonable. The other thing I'd say in this market is that you have two super teams in the NL, and the Dodgers and the Braves, whose win totals are 103 and 101, and then you have the Phillies at 89, and then you have no one else is above the Cubs at 85. So there is scope where if the Pirates win 83, 84 games and sneak in as a wild card, that could be a winning Manager of the Year case. I also think that I would just keep an eye on the managers for the Mets, Giants, Diamondbacks, Padres, these teams that are forecast for low to mid 80s wins who, if they ride a bit of luck or they're better than expected, and then all of a sudden they're a mid 90s team that's competing for the division and is a lock-in wildcard team, then those managers could get in the mix as well. But if you can, I think there might still be some 15-1 Shelton around the Pirates manager. So that would be my best bet in the market. And then if you can find some Ollie Marmol in the 9-1 range, I think that is pretty decent as well. All right, we are closing in on opening day, but it's never too late to squeeze in another draft. So for those cramming before the regular season begins, grab your Roto-World Baseball Draft Guide. It's loaded with comprehensive positional rankings, projections, and player profiles to ensure your draft is a success. Visit NBCSports.com/draft guide and use code baseball24 to get 10% off at checkouts. All right, AL Manager of the Year. Also loaded with candidates from the Central Division. AJ Hinch is your favorite. Detroit Tigers manager at plus 550. Matt Quatraro is second at 7-1. Stephen Vogt is 10-1, third favorite, manager of the Guardians. Then you have Scott Servais, Brandon Hyde, Kevin Cash. Is your next runners. What do you make of this market?
Yeah. Before anchoring on price, if you had just said, who's the surprise team in the AL this year? Across all the smart people you've talked to in baseball, Jay, it's the Tigers, and it's not close. They have this year's kind of buzzy team, I would say. I think last year's buzzy team was the Twins, at least from what I remember. The two things I remember from last year, everybody was pro Twins and against the White Sox, and those were both very correct. This year, people are very, very buzzy about the Tigers, which is why this is the shortest, Hinch is the shortest price on the board. I personally think all the teams in the AL Central are pretty weak, and I think that winning a weak division, the weakest in baseball, is not necessarily going to garner much excitement among the voting blocks. So I kind of want to bet against these guys' names at the top. And the name I'm going to throw out there, no disrespect to the great Dusty Baker and all he's done in these years managing in baseball, but would it be crazy if Joe, I don't want to get his name wrong, Joe Espada, would it be crazy if he is better at some of the technical, analytically based thinking that we know Dusty Baker was somewhat,
challenged,
lackluster to embrace some of the advanced, aspects of Moneyball. And so, I think there's a reasonable case here that with just a little bit more kind of, eyes open to the analytics, managing the Astros, that Houston might overachieve this year, at which point Joe Espada, I think, would get a serious look. He's not going to be a name people know, but I think there is a narrative to be spun there if this team makes any kind of a step forward.
Yep. And the good thing there is they only won, despite, being a win from the World Series in the regular season, they've hugely underwhelmed and only won 90 games. So there is scope for them to make, they could be a 100-win team. That's not the most outrageous thing. They could make a big improvement and be the story of the AL, certainly. I think, so there's two guiding things for me in this market. One is if the Mariners win the division, and they're like plus 225 to win the division, I don't believe they've won the division in 20 years. And if Scott Surveys, who's around, you can get like 12 to 1, 14 to 1 on Scott Surveys, if I'm saying his name right, Elena Rabakina, if they can win the division over the Astros and the Rangers, you two ALCS participants last year, I think that is a pretty reasonable case. So I don't think that, right now the market is saying he's like a 1 in 5 chance to win manager of the year if he wins the division. I don't think that is correct at all. I think he should be more in the plus 800, plus 900 range. And then the other one for me, I kind of forgot about this because I didn't pay any attention to this team last year. The Kansas City Royals won 56 games last year, and their win total this year is 74.5. So they're projected just off the bat for an 18.5 game improvement. And if you look at their playoff odds, they're plus 460 to make the playoffs. I'm sorry. If they go from 56 wins to making the playoffs, Matt Quatraro wins manager of the year. It's done. I don't think that's beatable. Unless AJ Hinch wins the division with the Tigers and wins like 95 games, I don't think anything's beating the Royals making the playoffs for the first time in forever after winning 56 games. I think the good thing there too, in terms of just viewing the make playoffs prices correlated with as like basically an absolute correlation with winning manager of the year, is that I think Hinch is the only other guy with the story and ceiling with the Tigers to beat that type of case. And it's obviously massively anti-correlated because if the Royals are winning games, that's, the Tigers lose equity from being in the same division as them. So I think Quatraro, I would have him the favorite in this market just because I don't really see the realistic chances of him losing if they make the playoffs.
Yeah, your point's completely fair. I will be honest with you. I look at that Royals number and I'm scratching my head.
How are they going to make the playoffs?
Yeah, well, yeah, that part of the equation is tough for me. And honest, I'll be perfectly candid here. Plenty of players who are going to be major league day one starters this year that I have never heard of, and a lot of them play for the Royals. But so they these guys as a youth movement all emerging in one season. We've seen it happen plenty of times. So I'm not going to suspend disbelief that it can't happen. But I would say that that one's a fun one for the upside, but And honestly, yeah, if you're going to take a shot on the Royals surprising to the good, you might as well get a payday like 7-8 to 1, whatever your best you can find for Quatraro. But I'm not sure what the path to victory for the Royals is.
Yep. Well, I mean, like Circa has them plus 395 to make the playoffs. If you go back minus 500 the other side, they're 14% on Fangraphs to make the playoffs. I would say that your fair is probably somewhere in between those two numbers, perhaps.
Okay.
And if that's the case, then Quatraro, who's 7-1 to 9-1 out there, I just don't see how that's not decent value. But so that would be my bet in that market. Some of the other guys in the Central, like Stephen Vogt, if the Guardians win the division, sure. Some of these other guys are too short price, like Brandon Hyde on the Orioles.
Yeah.
I mean, they won 101 games last year. Like, how did they go up? And he won the award last year. Kevin Cash on a Rays team that's projected to win 14 and a half games less than last year. Like, they won 99 games. I don't see how he wins either.
Yeah. Yeah, this is the fun part of this exercise, honestly, is doing exactly what you did and putting bright lines through a lot of these guys who are just not going to win. And those two were at the very top of my list.
Yep. Okay, let's go to the NBA. But first, the Premier League race is tightening, Drew, and one of the most important matches of the season is this Sunday when Erling Haaland and Man City take on Arsenal as the Gunners try to claim their first title in 20 years. Watch the matchup at 11:30 a.m. Eastern, only on NBC and Peacock. We'll say there is nothing better. Well, there's a few things better, but not many better than a marquee end of season Premier League matchup that's title shaping, because the Man City Liverpool game was incredible theatre. And this one is probably going to be a little bit more defensive just because these teams are a bit more cautious than the kind of helter-skelter death metal play of Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool at times, but still should be very exciting.
Can I ask you a real quick question about like when you have a situation like this? So we're coming off of a long international break here. Does that impact the way that these teams, team chemistry, things like that, or not worried about it with these guys? They've been playing so well together that it's just not going to matter.
I think it's just difficult because it's kind of like the thing of you're at the Ryder Cup and Brooks Koepka and Bryson DeChambeau hate each other, apparently. It's like, wow, how do I price that in? Like, I don't know how it's Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid don't get along. How do I price that in with certainty either way? So, I mean, you'd have to think it matters to some degree, but exactly who it favors over another team, which players are getting more impacted. Is it good if you played in the international break and you're not rusty? Or is it better if you just had rest and you have more energy and niggling injuries recuperated? So I think that stuff matters. It's just very difficult to specify exactly who has the advantage off of that. But certainly it is something to watch for. And and if Arsenal come out and they can't complete basic passes, then it's probably a bad sign. All right. Speaking of basic passes not being able to be completed, Monday night's NBA slate was an all-time shocker, which we detailed. A ton of double-digit favorites. I watched every second of Wizards Bulls, and it wasn't pretty at all. It was real bad, in fact.
No, your Wizards shout plus 12 was never in doubt.
Yeah. No, it wasn't. They started off 15-0. In retrospect, I would have preferred to have been wrong, and the Bulls had gotten the win, but we'll take it. Let's talk about Wednesday's slate, which is better than Monday's slate, which we went over. Certainly, some good games on tap. A couple of national TV blockbusters, if you want to. Certainly the later one, Phoenix at Denver, qualifies. Clippers at Philly, I think qualifies, given that it's Harden going back to Philly, even if the Sixers aren't very good at the moment. And then my favorite game on the slate, Golden State at Orlando. Big for Magic Southeast Division, big for Jamal Mosley, Coach of the Year, big for the Warriors if they want to avoid, well, it's not even avoiding the play-in. They need to get in the play-in at this point. What jumps out to you on the board?
Yeah, Orlando.
It looks like they're 4.5 point favorites.
Yeah, this situational spot is the kiss of death for the Warriors. Good luck, guys. That's just a brutal run here for you're at the tail end of a brutal run playing like every game ultimately matters a ton, and you're running up against a rested Orlando team that's been home for what feels like a month. I know it hasn't been a month, but it feels like it's been quite a while since this team really went through the rigors of what is a typical NBA schedule. So huge advantage for Orlando in this game. And actually, like after a very noisy week of rest not really meaning or mattering at all last week, and then even going back to the All-Star break, rest advantages have been a little bit noisy and a little bit less instructive. Yesterday was just an entire tale of rest advantage mattered for so many of those upsets were kind of keyed on teams kind of falling, losing their legs and falling apart, looking squarely at you, Boston Celtics. You got a couple of teams that are dealing with it. Golden State Warriors at the top of the list up against the rested Orlando Magic. The Pistons are dealing with it up against the rested Minnesota Timberwolves. The Cavaliers are dealing with it against the rested Charlotte Hornets. Now, I know that matchup was not as the Hornets were not as competitive as one would have hoped yesterday, but again, still a decent rest advantage for them here. Indiana, huge rest disadvantage against Chicago, and the Memphis Grizzlies with a decent rest advantage over LA. So lots of kind of finally at long last a bunch of kind of in equal spots in terms of rest, which is exciting. In terms of what matters for the playoffs, you nailed it. In terms of like the high profile games, the top of the list in terms of interest is going to be Phoenix, Denver. And really like when Phoenix, when you gonna play at some point, you gonna play well. Like we're all waiting here. Like you look at kind of market ratings right now. The market still treats Phoenix like they are gods, and none of that is backed up with performance on the court. And so, yeah, if the fact that you're getting a market emerge here between Denver and Phoenix when they've been moving in opposite directions for as long as they have is pretty interesting and pretty telling. So. I'm out of hope here that the Suns are going to do anything. And honestly, the fact that they're falling out of the mix for a top 6 seed is hurting me in more ways because the Kings now have, that much, they're fighting with one fewer team potentially, maybe with 2 fewer teams, depending on how the Pelicans play in the absence of Brandon Ingram, and the Clippers playing while they're defending themselves. Like there's all kinds of very strange things going on in 4 through 8 right now in the NBA. And none of it looks like it's portending well for Phoenix. So, just fundamentally, Phoenix is a bad matchup against Denver, beyond just the fact that they're not playing especially well right now. They're going to probably need 30 minutes out of Yusuf Nurkic in this one, and he's going to have the game of the season in order to keep them, within arm's reach and find a way to get a win against a Denver team that looks like they are cruising for a 1 seed.
Yep. I have 3 things on the slate. One, that Phoenix-Denver game right now is just an absolute mess of injury designations.
Yeah.
Jamal Murray is listed questionable, as is Aaron Gordon. MPJ and Jokic are probable. And then you have Bradley Beal and Yusuf Nurkic, both questionable. And Beal didn't practice with his finger, and Nurkic left the game against the Spurs with his ankle and didn't come back, I think. So that is a mess. Good luck predicting exactly who's going to be playing in that game. The other 2 things, it's time, Clippers. It's time to show up and be counted on national television. They're 6-point dogs at the Sixers. The Sixers are horrific. Like they're 13 and 25 without Embiid. Tyrese Maxey, who I am against in this most improved player market, he was magnificent against the Kings in that first quarter. I think he was 7 of 11 for 21 points. And doing that midway through the second quarter, he was minus 19 because the team is so bad. And it was basically just his scoring and then nothing else. And look, it's not, I don't want to delve too much into the most improved player. Like it is a little bit weird that he is not elevating the team to where they're not better than 13 and 25. At the same time, I don't really think it's his fault that they're 13 and 25. Like he's excellent. It's just the rest of the team they've gotten nothing out of Buddy Hield, which is really weird. I thought they would get more out of him, but
he's doubtful, so he's probably not going to play.
So they're in a bit of trouble in terms of just their depth. Melton being out has been really bad. Clippers just have to win a game at some point. Like they've served up 2 0 out of 10 performances back to back at home against Philly and Indiana. So I mean, they're 6-point favorites. So the market is projecting that they're going to show up, and they're at full health now that Westbrook is back. So no excuses for the Clippers. And then the other one, and this would be my one bet on the board. I get that they're going to be coming off a back-to-back against New Orleans, and I get that the Rockets are playing really well, but the Thunder have to be bigger than 6-point favorites at home to Houston.
It's big number.
I can't that number needs to be higher because I think when they played Houston a couple of weeks ago in Oklahoma City with Şengün healthy, I think the Thunder were like 10.5-point favorites. Like I can't just reconcile the market adjusting so much, and when you factor in that Şengün, perhaps the best player on the team, along with Van Vliet, is out, that has to more than counteract, I think, the back-to-back and how well Houston have been playing of late. So by the time this podcast comes out, we'll see if that number is held, but I think seems very light to me.
I got big for what it's worth on OKC and Dallas tonight. So you'll already know those results when you hear them. I need OKC to come through against this Pelicans team without Brandon Ingram. I rate kind of the current state, like snapshot. I don't take huge exception to 6.5 points for Oklahoma City and Houston, because right now my heat index for Houston is just outrageous. Like, this is a different team. They
still don't have good players. Like, I don't understand.
I can't tell you why this happens sometimes, but they're playing extremely well. And you try to dig into it a little bit, and like, is it opponent specific? Yes, to a degree. Like, they've played a lot of games and a lot of teams that they really just matched up perfectly with, / playing against teams that were really mailing it in. But you have these young guys playing with confidence. If you're Ime Udoka, like, I think this is your measuring stick game here against OKC. So you're going to get a real effort out of Houston in this one. And the fact that OKC is on a back-to-back after playing New Orleans is a little tricky. So yeah, I'm gonna steer clear of that matchup, but that is a very, very clearly a measuring stick game for Houston, because right now I would put Houston as the 6th best team in the West by my ratings.
I can't get there. Here's who they've beaten in this streak since Şengün went down. Spurs won by 2 points. Home Washington. Home against the Cleveland team, and that was Donovan Mitchell said that his knee was so bad he felt like he couldn't get past anyone, and he hasn't played since. Washington again. Bulls, where DeRozan got ejected in like the second or third quarter. Utah, who I don't think were playing their guys in that game. Yeah, there was no Markkanen. Yeah. And then Portland again. Like, they've beaten absolutely nothing. And I guess that Jalen Green is playing really well, and Van Vliet is fantastic, but I just can't. I can't quite. I know that they're really hot at the moment, and they were having better performances before that. But I mean, this was a team that, with Şengün was headed for, like 36 and 46, and they're on this tear at the moment. But it has been like every single team they've beaten has been either really bad or compromised.
So they have something going for them though, with Thompson at the 5.
Sure. Yeah. No, I agree.
And it kind of, I don't understand really why that specifically has unlocked him, because I like the stuff that's showing up green for them all of a sudden that was really not part of their their DNA when Şengün was sort of the engine of the offense. Like, I don't know why they're better at pick and roll now. Like, I don't know why, like, they're playing faster. Like, there's a bunch of like really small things that are really tough to truly get any type of read on. But the reality is that, yes, they're beating teams who are in bad spots, but they're doing it in even more impressive fashion than the market expected. Like, they're not just winning these games, like, they're covering going away. And you got to go back to their back-to-back losses and non-covers against the Thunder in the end of February. And since that time, to only be, have one loss against the spread, and it was a game where you eked out a win on the road against the Spurs. Like, that's stand up and kind of think hard about how you're rating us. And coming full circle now to OKC, the last team that you really got, truly shown the door by, is going to be a pretty fun measuring stick on Wednesday night.
Yeah. I think a big thing of it is just in these past 9 games, they're shooting 39% from 3 and opponents are shooting 34.5%. And I get that they're destroying teams anyway, but I just can't. Jalen Green, who they were going to trade with multiple picks for Mikal Bridges at the deadline, like he's just the second coming now. And I get that Amen Thompson going at the 5 gives them a much more unique just look and makes them maybe just stranger to deal with than teams that are not as conventional. But at the same time, I'd rather just have Alper and Şengün at the 5.
Sure.
Better than all of these guys except for maybe Van Vliet. They just don't have that many good players. They don't understand how this could. I get that it feels to me like at the moment they're running bad teams out of the gym because they're playing hard. They have this unique identity, and they're making every 3, and opponents are missing every 3. And I think that's just added up to. I think they're going to get a little bit found out. I still think the Golden State will ultimately be the 10 seed ahead of them.
Final thought on this. So when they played OKC at the end of February, my neutral court rating on the Thunder was about 1.5 worse than an average team, and right now I make them about 2.5 points better. The Rockets. So I've got a delta upgrade of 4 points since the last time these two teams played, and we're getting about 3. That was with Şengün. It's just basically just the way they were playing, like just taking the numbers out of that one. So a 2.5, a 3-point adjustment between then and now, and just in terms of the quality of that you're getting from the way they're playing is not crazy. And then you want to dock the Thunder a little bit because of the situational spot there, and tomorrow, then I'm okay with that. So yeah, it's actually kind of neutral rest, really. Like both teams are pretty close to average rest there. So small advantage for Houston, but nothing to really write home about. So I would not adjust the line for situation, but I can see the market docking them like a 0.5 point. So I think ultimately a 2 to 2.5 point relative, kind of closure between these two teams in the last month is probably fair.
Okay. Well, I mean, look, if Jalen Green is just going to keep on averaging, almost 30 a game on 50% from the field and 41% from 3, then this team needs to get upgraded.
Hey man, if Flacco can win comeback player of the year in the last 5 weeks of the season, why can't Jalen Green win most improved player in the last 5 weeks of the season? That's all I want to know.
The only guy who I will accept coming from the clouds to win most improved player is Jalen Williams.
Jalen Williams would be fine.
He's the most deserving candidate.
Yes.
But he's not but if anyone's allowed to come from the clouds, he's the only guy. All right. Don't forget to check out NBCsports.com for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks to those of you watching on the NBC Sports YouTube channel. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, don't forget to rate and subscribe. Also a reminder to find all your favorite NBC Sports shows on Amazon Music. Just head to amazon.com/NBC Sports. From Jay Croucher and Drew Dinsick, we'll see you soon.